So I got a new desk. I replaced my corner desk. With a dual motor sit stand desk. It's pretty fantastic. Check it out. So perfect for sitting. Then say you want to go standing. One press of a memory button takes it to the perfect height for typing, which I have set. Then you want to go gaming. Next level up. And maybe you want to do some writing. Right about here feels right. Full potential of the desk. Super tall, right? So I'm 5'10". This is easily appropriate for someone who is 6'2". And then standing to sitting. Isn't that great? So, welcome back. The reason I brought up the desk isn't just to show off my new desk, which I'm pretty excited about, as you can tell, but I believe it's indicative of the positive changes I'm making in my life now, which is a very new thing. I've definitely made many purchases along the way, usually in order to feel good. Those endorphins or whatnot you get when you make a substantial purchase. But I bought this desk in order to be more productive. I have a few endeavors planned that could benefit from being able to work while standing. There are a handful of studies out there right now that seem to indicate that working while standing can lead to more productivity and more creativity and a higher level of concentration. So anyway, I made the purchase. It's a Smart Desk 2 by Autonomous is the company. They claim to be the most affordable sit-stand desk on the market, and I found this to be true after some light research. I've had it for about a week now, and I highly recommend it. So, where were we? Oh yes, wanting to live. So I thought I'd share a little bit of my past as we go along, not only as a mere point of interest, but in order to better communicate the source of my depression and anxiety, the whys, other than mere genetic predisposition. There is definitely an environmental factor to be considered. And I thought, where better to start than at the beginning? And then while trying to remember the beginning, I realized that I have virtually no memory of my life before 7 or 8 years old. I have flashes of what I am told to be memories of maybe age 4 or 5, but those can be contributed to photos that I've seen or videos that were taken. My first coherent string of memories are from age 7 or 8, just after my brother was born, although oddly enough I have no memory of him as a baby. Your guess is as good as mine. My mother and father separated many times, got back together, obviously, many times. So my dad was in and out of the picture throughout my entire life, but in those early years that I recall, 8 years old, he was there, my mother and father together. My father was abusive, to say the least. Physically abusive, often enough, but emotionally, verbally abusive constantly. So those earliest memories I have, I live in a state of constant fear. Although I only know that by looking back on it, because at the time I just thought it was normal. Just this state of hyper alertness, knowing that while playing or doing anything, that at any moment it could all be taken away. I remember being tense with the expectation of yelling. It was an environment of complete control. No matter what we were doing, he could at any moment change everything. At any moment he could erupt. It would be red in the face rage. Sometimes things were thrown. Sometimes it was just asserting his dominance, taking some benign thing that I was doing or my mother was doing and taking full control of it and limiting it or ending it. I definitely hated it, and I didn't know any different, so I didn't rail against it like I would in later years. But that state of constant fear, oddly enough, this had never been analyzed or discussed by any of my previous doctors, at least not to an extent where we came to any kind of realization. That was one of the amazing things about this current doctor that I am seeing. After a brief summary of my experiences, the doctor gave me a questionnaire to fill out because he suspected that I had PTSD, which had never been mentioned or considered by any other doctor, which comes with its own forms of therapy, treatment, reading material, and whatnot. In the end, it was determined that while I may not be experiencing PTSD symptoms now, at one point in my life I definitely was suffering from it. Nightmares are an indicator of post-traumatic stress disorder, and while I don't have nightmares now, at least not on a regular basis, I did in my preteens and to a lesser degree in my teens. On a very regular basis and to a pretty disturbing degree, I had nightmares, some of which are still memorable to this day. I wouldn't sleepwalk, but I would definitely have sort of waking dreams. I was not conscious, but I would have dreams that would carry over into reality, insofar as my mother would recount stories to me of talking or crying in my sleep, sometimes sitting up and acting out scenarios, whatever was happening in the moment. My fears definitely manifested themselves in my dreams, in my subconscious, and often ended in me waking up in a jolt, covered in sweat. But now, knowing that I had PTSD is just one more piece of the puzzle in the continuing effort to find out why I am the way I am. And again, this was a meaningful diagnosis that was uncovered by Dr. Early in one session. It was something that had been overlooked for many years before by many other doctors. I want to apologize for the quality or lack thereof and the disheveled nature of this week's vlog. Unfortunately, this week my to-do list has just been overwhelming, but I wanted to make sure I lived up to my commitment of a weekly vlog. As much as I hope that this benefits someone out there, hopefully many out there who are in need of hope, this is also very therapeutic for me, and committing to something and then living up to that commitment is sort of new for me. There's just so many things I want to talk about. I really wanted to go into the injection process this week, but that is a topic I really don't want to rush through. I think the fear of the injection process and the threat of the possible bad trip are a huge roadblock in the willingness of some to pursue this treatment. Just let me assure you that these fears are largely unfounded. I want to devote a significant portion of time to going over the process in great detail, and hopefully I will do that next week. As far as my own current state of mental health, I am roughly 2 months out from my last ketamine injection. In the past week, I've had a couple of minor bouts of depression. Negative thoughts would creep in, and take a temporary foothold, I still struggle with regret a lot. In fact, the two things I struggle the most with are anger and regret. Sometimes they feel related, sometimes very separate. In these particular recent cases, it began with regret, and I found myself dwelling a little too long in that place, and that led to some heavy sadness, which didn't lead to crying, but it just left me a little choked up. Quivering lip, a few tears shed. But unlike other times that this has happened and taken control and dominated my day or night or days, I was able to grab hold of that feeling and not suppress it, but to convince it that it was being unrealistic, because in reality, in this moment, all is well. And I think regret can serve a purpose. I've started to look at regret as a placeholder of sorts for desires and goals that I had thought unattainable, that too much time had passed. Granted, there is regret that involves the way you treated a person, or the kind of regret where you failed to act when you should have. I don't exactly have the answer for those yet. Although I think that the goal is to become a person who wouldn't have said those things or who would have acted in that moment. So anyway, my goal is to push the ketamine treatments further and further apart until hopefully I no longer need them at all. But judging by my couple of moments over the past week, I think I'm probably due for another round. I think at this point, at least in my mind, it's important not to push the limits and to stick with what my doctor recommends. So it turns out there are some scheduling conflicts with my next round of treatment, and it turns out it'll be another month before receiving my next treatment, which will bring the total to 3 months between ketamine injections. I wasn't intending on going that far between this early. However, that scheduling conflict is due to my sister seeking treatment, and I cannot begin to tell you how happy that makes me. One step closer to healing this family. I would gladly go a year between treatments if that's what it took. Well, I say that now, but 6 months down the line, who knows, right? So anyway, again, I apologize for the quality of this video. It's super late at night. I'm exhausted if you can't tell. Starting this weekend, I'll be house/dog sitting for a couple of my very best friends. So you can look forward to a couple of giant, unruly Airedale Terriers in next week's episode. Thanks for hanging in there with me, and I'll see you all next week.